serve. We honor our young people that want to serve in the military academies.
I'm here to make sure the American people understand that London is about to wipe out the entire United States. You guys promise to have your safety. You can't serve in this country. You're all dead. You can't serve. So this is a big joke. All you guys are joking yourself. Sorry, Brad. You gave a good speech to us. I encourage you to have courage. Have some courage.
Free fucking country.
Are you joking me? You recruited myself in the military? What a joke. We buy the Constitution of the United States and we don't install Glass Steagall. Get Glass Steagall for me. We want to have real congressmen, real presidents, real people with real things.
Freedom of speech. Get your hands up your asses, y'all. Vote for him.
I just want to thank the color guard that was here for their interest in serving our country, and I want to thank those who applied to the military academy.
We look forward to helping with any federal government problems. Also, if you don't know where to start, maybe it's a city issue, maybe it's a state issue, could be something with the county, please call our office. We'll get you headed in the right direction. Like I said, we're there every day, Monday through Friday, and we look forward to serving you. We'd also like to introduce our staff that makes up the Congressional Constituent Service Team. So Matt Viacia, Oscar Garcia, Carolina Krywick, Lisa Montano, John Alford, Arlette Abrahamian, Kelsey Sillerud, and our intern Chris. Thank you for being here today. Everyone look forward to stepping back into the town hall, and you can take a time to meet them. And also, if you need some questions answered today, we'd be happy to provide some answers. With that, I give Congressman Brad Sherman the floor.
I want to thank my staff for working today, and if you find any part of this presentation boring and you have a problem with a federal agency, we have a table out there where you can deal with your problem instead of listening to the proceedings. Let's see. Now, as I said, we've had a town hall in this room with students. They asked excellent questions. We had a very good town hall back on August 25th here. We may use this auditorium in the future. Let us know if you think this auditorium or the Receipt Auditorium is where you'd like to see our next town hall. And we had one in Sherman Oaks a while ago, and we'll have one there again. Now, I hope everybody will fill out one of these yellow cards and give us your email address, even if you know that we have your email address. It's weird. I work for the federal government, a lot of weird things. If I get your email address on this card, then I'm allowed to stay in touch with you and pretty much as often as I can think of something to say, and I can make sure to invite you to future town halls. If I just have your email address some other way, like the list vendors provided it to me, then there are strict limits on how often I can send you an email, and if I don't invite you to the next town hall, it's the fault of those rules and the fact that I don't have your email on a yellow card. I serve on the Foreign Affairs Committee, where I'm the Chief Democrat on a subcommittee that deals with two issues. One is terrorism and nonproliferation. The other is trade and international commerce. I'm also a senior member of the Financial Services Committee that deals with banking, insurance, Wall Street, housing, and mortgages. So if you give me questions in those areas, I can give you a more in-depth response. Some people, particularly those new to our town halls, kind of get the idea, well, Sherman's a congressman, he must be here to tell us that everything being done in Washington makes a lot of sense, and my job in Washington is to go along and get along and then come back to the Valley and convince everybody that it's just wonderful. This is not the role I play. I represent you in Washington, and often that means disagreeing not only with this administration, but the last administration, sometimes with my party, sometimes disagreeing with the other party. I'm not here to tell you that your federal government is well organized and doing a great job. I wish it was. And a few examples along those lines. I'm carrying the bill to end our most favored nation status with China until such time as we negotiate a whole new trading system leading to balanced trade. That doesn't put me in the mainstream of Washington politics. I led the effort against TARP. That didn't win me a whole lot of friends with leadership either. The other thing I'll point out is that some people come here as if this was the World Wrestling Federation. And I've been asked by the World Wrestling Federation not to cut into their pay-per-view business. Now, with World Wrestling Federation, everybody comes there to root and cheer for one guy and to regard the other guy as an ogre. And I hope we get to actually look at the nuance of the individual issues rather than just, one side of the room chanting, "Go Obama," and the other half of the room saying, "Go away, Obama." I want to deal with the issues each one at a time rather than questions like, don't you think Obama's great or don't you think Obama's terrible? Now, Eric, I'm going to deal with one issue at the outset. I'm going to deal with it at length because it's the reason an awful lot of folks came here, and that is Syria. On August 21st, 1,400 people died in East Ghouta. I've been to the classified briefings. I am convinced that that was on the order of the upper echelons of the Assad regime. Various resolutions were presented to Congress. I have a rule, before I make a decision on anything, I actually read it. I read both of them, and I came out against both of them for reasons that are simpler than the foreign policy issues. The first resolution was put forward by the administration, and it authorized the president to do anything he chose to do in response to the chemical weapons used by Assad. Authorized boots on the ground, authorized an expedition of unlimited duration. So I came out against that one because I read it. Another resolution passed the Senate Foreign Relations Committee by a vote of 10-7 or 10-8, depending upon how you count the junior senator from Massachusetts. And that resolution had a section that said no military ground operations, and then it said in Syria for combat operations. And I just looked at those 5 words and I wondered why they were there. Were we being asked, did the Senate majority in that committee vote to give the president authority to have ground combat operations as long as they were outside Syria? And keep in mind, these weapons may very well be taken to Lebanon. There's evidence that some of them already have been. And were we being called upon to authorize non-combat operations by our ground forces inside the borders of Syria? Keep in mind our involvement in Vietnam started with advisors and trainers. So I came out against that resolution just by reading it. Often reading the resolution is easier than reading the Middle East. Looking at the intelligence, there are 11 instances in which chemical weapons may have been used on a small scale, and there's circumstances in which there could be some conjecture. I met with the Russian ambassador last Tuesday, and he presented evidence, I don't know how to weigh it, that the opposition was responsible for one of these instances because it was so crude and weak technology in how it was carried out. But each one of these instances prior to August 11th was small enough that you could argue it's not inconceivable the opposition did it. You don't have any signals intelligence. You can't trace it to the upper echelons of the Assad regime. And even if Assad soldiers did it, you could very well have a lieutenant who thinks his command is about to be overrun, and he uses chemical weapons without the authority of higher-ups. This is particularly the case because in this civil war, surrendering often isn't an option. There are units of both sides that do not take prisoners. Well, they take them, but they don't survive. Obama did draw a red line last year. There are those who say, well, that's just his red line. Well, keep in mind, and I was at the Foreign Affairs Committee with all the Republicans and Democrats who really concentrate on foreign affairs. And I asked whether any of my colleagues had criticized or disassociated themselves from Obama's red line last year. None had. And that's because, and we have benefited from that red line to the extent that Assad has been deterred from using his chemical weapons on a major scale until August 21st. And we've benefited from a whole bunch of other red lines that other presidents have drawn, from the day that Monroe drew a red line down the middle of the Atlantic and said that we are not going to, that we are going to oppose any further colonization by European countries in this hemisphere. So it is America's red line, but how to deal with this circumstance is complicated. One option is to do nothing. All these options, well, one of these options is unsure, and three of the options are bad. Doing nothing means that Assad will continue to use chemical weapons. The 1925 protocol against the use of chemical weapons will become really a dead letter, because if Assad survives, the history books will say he was about to lose, he used his chemical weapons, he killed a bunch of people, the world didn't do anything, and he and his son and his grandson and his great-grandson continue to rule Syria to this day. But all the other approaches have some disadvantages. The president proposed that we engage in military action, but he promised that basically would be at little or no risk to any of our military. That we would not, I send our military, that we would not, of course, have boots on the ground, that we probably wouldn't even fly over Syrian airspace, that we, I think it's pretty obvious, would not hit the chemical weapons depots. So we would be trying to prevent and deter the use of chemical weapons, but we would not hit the depots themselves. So why don't you hit the chemical weapons depots? Well, what happens when you hit a chemical weapons depot with explosives? You got a lot of chemical weapons. Not only do some of the chemical weapons shells explode into the environment, but the people guarding the chemical weapons scatter, and the shells that haven't exploded are available for a variety of dissident elements to scoop up and take wherever. So it's not a perfect way to prevent their use, and depending on you count, half, 2/3, 3/4 of Assad's ability to use chemical weapons would have remained. It would have been pretty good deterrence, in that it would have signaled, use these weapons and you lose valuable military assets, because we could have hit his planes, we could have hit his small navy. But if Assad gets desperate, he's going to use whatever he has. And I don't know who's going to win this Syria civil war, but it's very possible that Assad will become desperate a year or two from now. So as far as preventing and deterring, it would have had some effect. The disadvantages, I'm sure, will come up in questions. There are several people who are here just to talk about the disadvantages of taking military action in Syria. But the advantages would have been modest. Another approach would have been to arm the opponents. Now, the president announced in June that that's exactly what he was going to do with lethal material, and virtually nobody called my office to say that was a bad idea. It was on page 17 of the newspaper, and most newspapers are only 16 pages. So that is an option because if done in response to the chemical weapons, the president could say, we found a way to punish Assad, we're just going to provide weapons to these groups in quantities and quality that we otherwise wouldn't have. The problem is that the anti-Assad groups, and
No good leaders there.
excuse me, sirs, folks, we're going to keep order here, or we'll just be silent. I will not be responding to anyone's statement from the audience unless they're there at the microphone. Ordinarily, I speak for a shorter period of time at the beginning of the town hall, but everybody I know wants me to talk about Syria, so I'm talking about Syria.
There are no good leaders there.
As to the Syrian opposition, it is a mixture from people who would agree with you and me to people who would kill you and me if they had the opportunity. I think, especially with the decline of the Brotherhood in Egypt, that the Tehran-Assad-Hezbollah axis is a greater threat to us than the Sunni extremists. But that doesn't mean that the Sunni extremists are our friends. The moderate elements of the Syrian opposition have had circumstances where they get weapons, particularly from Turkey or Saudi Arabia, and then the bad elements of the opposition take the weapons. So there are some real disadvantages to arming the opposition. I think to the extent that you arm effective elements, you're going to influence things in Syria more on the right side than the wrong side. In any case, that was in June, that was being discussed in June. And then finally you have the Russian proposal. And I have made the statement that this might be the best thing to come out of Russia since vodka. And the new protocols put together by Kerry and I think are on the right side. We've got to declare, we've got to have international inspectors with the UN, disarm or remove. Now, will Assad hide some of these weapons? Perhaps. But keep in mind, even bombing at everything the president thought he might do was not going to take all the weapons, was not going to prevent all the weapons from being used. Wasn't going to really prevent half the weapons from being used. To the extent that you remove these weapons from the area or you destroy them, that's 60, 70, 80, 90%, way more than can be accomplished in any other way. And I'm convinced that, and keep in mind how much we're talking about, 2 million pounds of chemical weapons, 1,000 tons. Well, we know that that is the estimate of the US intelligence and of the Russian intelligence. Obviously, you know, I wasn't there when they were made, and we know that they're significant, and that's the best intelligence that we have. I think Russia's interests align with ours with regard to the chemical weapons. They want Assad to remain in power, but they know he may not be. They have a strong interest in avoiding the use of chemical weapons. They have been the victims of as many terrorist acts as we have, probably more. And they suffered from poison gas in World War I to a far greater extent than our troops. They know that as long as these weapons are there, maybe Assad will use them, or maybe they'll be captured, especially if Assad loses power. And some of the people fighting against Assad hold Russian passports. They're Chechens, they're from Dagestan, they're from any one of the oblasts of Russia or republics of Russia that have a Muslim insurgency. And these folks, they're fighting in Syria now, but if they get their hands on a loose shell of chemical weapons, they know how to take it back to Chechnya. And in fact, Chechen separatists have been responsible for hundreds and hundreds of Russian deaths in widely publicized terrorist actions. So for us, the use that these weapons might be used here in the American homeland is theoretical. For them, it is more practical. And I think Russia has some different interests than we do, but I think they are serious about getting a handle on these chemical weapons. With that, I guess the final comment is the president was on TV today saying that maybe he doesn't deserve high marks for style on this. He didn't this was not part of some grand plan to get the Russians to put forward a proposal. But frankly, if as a result of this effort, the majority of Assad's chemical weapons are neutralized, that will make us safer than we would have been. And if that is done without the risk of American casualties, that will make us, that will be a good thing. And if it's done without Syrian casualties as well. With that, why don't I open it up to questions?
So if anyone wants to ask a question, you should grab a red ticket. Chris is still offering tickets out, so if nobody's gotten a red ticket but they want one, just raise your hand and we'll have Chris come and get it to you in a moment. And then we're going to have some tickets drawn up here in the front. These will be our first ones. So if your number gets drawn, then just come up over here to the side and we'll use this microphone
you
there.
come up to the side if you want to ask a question. Now, if you don't, or if somebody else already asked your brilliant question, just pass and we'll go on to the next. We have far more people here who want to ask questions than we have time for. That's why we use this ticket system. Unless you have a winning ticket, losing lottery tickets aren't terribly valuable.
Okay, so the first number is 527. The second one is 604. The next one is 565. Next is 514, 551, 496, 612, 538, 508, and 523.
Okay, we'll start with those, and then whoever has that whoever is the next to last questioner in this group will pick a group of additional tickets, and we'll have more people stand up. Now, as to when you ask a question, please tell me your name, and please tell me what town you live in. If you're not from the 30th District, you're welcome to be here. You're welcome to have the refreshments out there, but the questions are for folks who live in the 30th Congressional District, the West and South San Fernando Valley. I'm going to ask you to ask an easy question. If you ask an easy question, I will give you the polite eye contact you deserve. If you ask a tough question, I will be rummaging through this notebook trying to figure out how to answer your question. You get 1 minute. You can ask as many questions as you want in your 1 minute, but I'm only going to answer one. And it's going to be the easiest of all the questions you ask. So please use 1 minute, ask one question, and I'll give you an answer. And I see we've got an awful lot of people who want to ask questions too. Are all those people standing up people who have winning tickets?
We haven't confirmed it yet.
Okay, well, we'll see. I know some people are anxious to be winners whether they have the winning ticket or not.
Do you have the time for this?
I don't know which of my staff is enforcing the 1 minute, but
Okay.
there is a trap door right below your seat.
Congressman, my name is Godfrey Harris. I live in Encino. I'm a former Foreign Service officer, and I've been 45 years as a public policy consultant. Since you only want to answer one question, and I had two, that's a great shame. I'll ask the two questions. I know which one you'll answer, which is a bigger shame. The first question is that the issue of chemical weapons in Syria, as a lot of us who are professionals in the foreign affairs area thought, the object was Iran rather than Syria, that the need to do something about chemical weapons in Syria really was to be responded to in Tehran rather than Damascus. But the real question I came today to ask you is that the President of the United States, as I'm sure you know, appointed an advisory committee on endangered species. That was an executive order on July 1st. Every member, both from the administration and from the public, are either professional animal lovers or others who are determined to preserve endangered species. There is another group. The question is, would you, Mr. Congressman, support a second voice before the President's task force made up of the International Ivory Society, which are curators, museum directors, antique dealers, auctioneers, and most of all, collectors who form the first draft of every museum collection?
Thank you. Okay. I have not reviewed the resume of everyone appointed to the Endangered Species Advisory Commission. I am confident that the President will get the advice he wants to get from the people who are his advisors, and I obviously support taking care of endangered species, but we need to do so in a reasonable way. But in general, the President gets to pick the advisors that he wants to pick. And as to your first question, there is a link between Iran and Syria, but the Syrian nuclear weapons are, the Syrian chemical weapons are as important in and of themselves. Let's go on to the next question.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Congressman. My name is Poonam Goyal. I'm going to ask you a question about foreclosing houses. Bank of America is being really mean, bad, and honey, can you show the file to the congressman how big it is? We started working last 5-6 years. Every month we're getting different kind of response. One said their property is foreclosed, another say no, we're going to refinance it. And we don't know what to do. Can you help us?
There are an awful lot of people who are still reeling from this economic crisis that we've had. And there are people who are would be on tough times, even on good times. There are people on tough times that make it difficult, that find great difficulty. We work with, and have been successful in working with, hundreds of people over the last several years in making sure the banks listen to their proposal, making sure that they're aware of the hemp and HARP programs that are designed to help homeowners. That being said, not everybody who can't afford to pay the mortgage can find a solution. So Lisa Montano is our expert on that. I believe she's at the table outside. This is not the place to discuss the details of your particular financial circumstance. So I can promise you that we can make the bank return your phone calls. I can't promise you that you're going to get the deal that you want to get. But at least we'll try. Let's go on to the next question.
Thanks.
Congressman, I'd like to ask you, or actually, to defund Obamacare, be behind defunding it, for it's an unconstitutionally forced upon the people. People's hours are going to be cut to 30 hours so that they can sidetrack out of this because they're not Congress. They don't have the power to opt out. They're not big business. They don't have the power to opt out. Everybody who seems to be in power can opt out, but the free Americans who pay the taxes can't.
Well, let me address your question.
Well, are you going to give me my minute?
I think you get 10 minutes.
Okay. So, it's a 160% increase in California. There's only 4 states that it's making it any cheaper in. Are you going to defund this thing before it crushes the economy with what's left of the economy?
Let me address first the constitutionality. We live in a society in which you're sometimes required to buy insurance. You want to drive? You need insurance. And keep in mind, everyone in this room, everyone in this room has been forced to buy health insurance since 1965. It's called Medicare. You're forced to buy it. You buy it from the government. You had to do it since 1965. And I've had town halls all through the late 90s, all through the Bush administration. Not a single person ever stood up and said Medicare was unconstitutional.
It's communist.
Now, as to whether it's good government policy, I think we settled that. The country elected Obama, knowing that he wanted pretty much what was implemented. He passed the bill, and they voted for him again.
Did you read it? You said earlier you read. You're going to read everything. You read everything. Did you read it? You didn't read it.
Your minute is over. It's time to move on to the next question.
Yeah. More lies. More lies.
Hello, how you doing? My old United Airlines buddy here. I'm Ed Reynolds. I live here in Woodland Hills, just down the street. Retired Air Force, 22 years.
Thank you for your service.
World traveler, 180 countries. Got that beat? And I'm here.
That was the other guy who had that lead.
Yes.
He ran last year. Go ahead.
Okay, my question has to do with Cuba. And why do we continually put them on a terrorist list? And why do we not open up travel and economic things with Cuba? You told us earlier about China. How about doing the same thing with Cuba?
Those who are, I mean, this is a complicated issue. We are not in a position to control or even dramatically affect the internal affairs of China. It's an enormous superpower. Many of the people focused on trying to bring democracy to Cuba believe that putting some pressure on the Cuban government, particularly with the imprisoned American who is there, particularly with other dissidents who are under terrible conditions, will lead to some benefits. I have voted for some pressure against Cuba. I've voted, on the other hand, for sales of food and medicine, etc. Other governments have taken other approaches. I think that Cuba will eventually move in the right direction. So, if you look at my voting record, it's about half of what you want it to be. Let's go.
Good evening. My name is Lillian Dawson. I've consulted your office several times. I spoke to Caroline and also Matt, and I'm wondering what you can do about the Veterans Administration. I'm a disabled veteran, and I have been waiting for over 10 years, and I have not received anything. I was wondering what you could do to help us.
I don't know your individual circumstance. Obviously, 10 years is a ridiculous amount of time. I don't know, I guess your husband served?
Yes.
I don't know how long he served or what benefits you're entitled to, but I do know that we will get a solid answer for you. When did you come into our office?
This was 2010. I talked to Carol and also Matt.
You talked to them over the phone?
No, I came into the office several times.
Okay. I don't know the status of your file, and look, there are circumstances where we push for an answer, and the regulatory and the administrative agency is able to point to some regulation, sometimes unfair, that says we're not doing anything. I don't know the individuality of your case. I do know that we will get on it, and John, make sure I get a memo. John, make sure I get a memo a week from today as to what we've done for you.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, I'm Los Angeles professor Charles Dirks. I was in the original Peace Corps and listened to ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for the country. So I became a member of Ghana 1. For John F. Kennedy, I helped him set up the Peace Corps, but a year before Obama was born, I'd already learned Swahili from Occidental College and UCLA, and I was in British East Africa building elementary schools. I'm a Peace Corps person. I go back to Governor William Bradford, started the Mayflower and Thanksgiving. He's my 18th grandfather. We signed the Declaration of Independence. And then I helped bring the Peace Corps back. After the Watts riots, I built Southwest College. As president of the faculty, I was Bobby Kennedy's co-campaign coordinator. I was with him when he was assassinated. And then, okay, I have here from Pierce College, this is the student who was on medical leave. The sheriff ordered her to come into Mission, and he wasn't from Mission, he was from Pierce. And then he said, I need to get out of here. I said, okay, and I turned to leave. He grabs my left arm, and it's still scarred. I've got all kinds of scar cuffs, and the medical bills right here. And the sheriff says on his declaration here that he grabbed my right arm. Everybody can see it's my
Sir,
left arm.
I think you've used your minute.
And, okay, but
There's not a major federal issue
it
here.
is. This is my death certificate signed by Kaiser. I am dying because Lee Baca broke the law, and Lee Baca should be removed.
Sir,
and to get the LAPD back on the campuses.
I don't know what your medical condition is or how this incident affected
And she will give it
it.
to you, and it's all here. And they
If there's a federal issue there, we'll be involved with it. Obviously, if a sheriff's deputy acted inappropriately, that's something to take up with the sheriff's office.
We have, and he covers it up, and he's been criticized. The FBI and all the rest are looking into that because it destroyed my life. They no longer teach Africa. They no longer teach Asia. I speak all those languages. They've done.
Sir, thank you very much. Thank you.
And we need safety. We need to
And,
get by.
and also, I want to thank you for your service in the Peace Corps. My wife was also a Peace Corps volunteer.
My
And
mom.
let's move on to the next
Where?
question. She was in Togo.
Thank you.
Hi, I think that remembers, but the big issue about 3 weeks ago was NSA data gathering. That seems to be gone now for the time being. But I was wondering to ask you if you'd be willing to sponsor a bill roughly along the following lines, that the government can issue a wiretap or something against an individual and it may remain secret for 10 years. And with a judge's ruling, it can remain secret for another 10 years. But after the secrecy lapses, the document or the order has to be published. And any statute of limitations where somebody could sue for inappropriate tapping begins at the point where it's published. This way, illegal wiretaps may still happen, but it will be a career risk for the person who signs it. So that may be somewhat of a balance between safety and privacy.
Our idea is a new one, and I try not to make a decision on the fly like that. I comment on things I've actually had a chance to study. But you've got a very interesting idea. I will be looking at that, and somewhat relevant to your question, I voted for the Amish Conyers amendment on eliminating NSA, wiretapping, etc.
Hi, I'm Janet Stoiberg. I'm from Tarzana, and I've been to your office many times before. This is kind of in continuation with the other gentleman about Obamacare. I'm on disability, and I know some of the providers that I have said that if this gets implemented, it's going to affect Medicare, and that's what I rely on when I have to get work done on my back. I have a chronic back condition. So I'm very concerned what's going to happen as a result of this. And I've been reading up more and more about this, and I think more and more employers are going to lose employees. They're going to have to let go of them because of it. So that's what's scary. We already have an economy that's not doing too well at this point. I don't want to see it get worse, and I want to see people have jobs. Plus, I want to be able to have medical care.
In a way, those two things are at opposite ends or in conflict with each other. The purpose of Obamacare is to have more people covered. This would mean that maybe we would see 5% increase in the total demand for certain types of medical services. Most medical offices I know wouldn't mind having 5% more come in. Some are so busy they're turning away patients. Here in the Valley, there are a lot of good medical providers. I don't see us ever being a circumstance where you can't find somebody good. And I don't know any medical provider who says, I'm going to fire my existing patients so that I can take on some new patient who didn't used to have coverage but now does because of Obamacare. The other issue is the effect this has on the economy. In terms of will employers not hire folks, et cetera. We've had a one-year delay in the employer mandate. I think that as this economy improves, we're going to see a decline in the unemployment rate. I don't know many employers who are so anxious not to provide any health coverage that they're going to cut people. And there's all kinds of like quips about how easy it is to avoid the law. It's a long law. Most of the loopholes have been pre-plugged. And it will not be easy to operate a significantly sized business with over 50 employees and not provide any coverage. You can't just go eeny, meeny, miny, mo, you're part-time, you've got to go and avoid the law. If the law was that easy to avoid, I wouldn't have so many people yelling at me that I should repeal it. Next.
Part of this I'm really addressing to the audience, in case you don't know. Illegal aliens will get Obamacare. It's true. It's in the bill. People over 70 will be severely limited as to what kind of care they get. They will get care. They will get care. I am worried about it because I'm over 70.
Please let her speak, especially if you disagree with her. Please continue.
The majority of doctors are against Obamacare. My doctors have told me how limited my care will be as I get older. And if you think you waited for a doctor for 2 weeks, you'll wait for 2 months. This is
I think your minute.
Here's my question. Let's get to the question. The question is twofold. Did you read all 1,700 pages before, or 2,300 pages before you voted for it? And did you understand it? And are you reading the 17,000 pages for Obamacare that has been generated since it was passed?
Let me answer all those questions. I read the bill. I read the changes to the bill that came out in the last week. I voted for the bill, and I'll explain why in a second. I haven't read the regulations in detail because I don't get to vote on the regulations. There's a lot of very interesting stuff being written in this world. If I just focus on the stuff that I get to vote on, I'll get plenty of reading. Now, as to the availability of care, I do not know of any specialty or subspecialty as to which there aren't many qualified doctors here in the Valley willing to accept new patients. There is, in some middle-class areas of the country, some shortage of doctors who will do obstetrics, but that has to do with the whole lawsuit situation, where people tend to be pretty upset if their baby is not healthy. As to how this, the general vote on Obamacare, we've got to remember where we were before the law. And here's where we were. There were 35 million uninsured people. They'd go to emergency rooms when they needed care. The hospital would run up a $10,000 bill. What does somebody without insurance, who can't even afford health insurance, do with a $10,000 medical bill? Okay, so the hospital puts a debt collection agency on it, and they harass the person, they get a few dollars. The hospital doesn't get anything, the debt collection agency gets the few dollars, and that's it. Okay, so there's $10,000 worth of care provided by that hospital. What do? They raise the price on everybody else in the hospital. So now your Blue Cross card has to pay $11 for the aspirin that you get in the hospital. Well, what does that do? Blue Cross then raises its fee. Your employer pays, you don't even necessarily realize how much they raise their fee, because if you have insurance through your employer, they're paying most of it. But the fee goes up. Well, what does that do? It causes 1 out of 20 employers to say, we just can't pay this anymore. They terminate coverage for their people. Now those people, when they get sick, go to the emergency room. They get an $11,000 emergency bill. Goes to the collection agent, the hospital doesn't get anything. Now it's a $12 aspirin. Now Blue Cross is charging more. And oh, by the way, they add a little bit more to get more profit. Now your employer isn't providing that. Oh, by the way, if you need to use the emergency room, gee, I hope it's not all that sensitive about when you're going to get care, because there are 4 other people in there with flu. But that's the only place they can be. So you're so this system was descending. 35 million uninsured, high rates for insurance, now 37 million uninsured, higher rates for insurance. Now 40 million people uninsured. So it's not a choice between Obamacare on the one hand and the way we remember it in 2002. The system was imploding and spiraling downward. And so our choice is either people are able to go to clinics, or the hospitals can't collect for emergency services, and more people don't have coverage, leading to fuller and fuller emergency rooms. So that's why I voted for the bill. I didn't think it was perfect, and I'll add one more thing. The version of Obamacare that was passed was what people in electronics would call the beta version. That bill came out of the Senate, and it was supposed to go to conference committee. And then Senator Kennedy died. And his replacement said that he wouldn't vote for any improved version or any amendments to it. And so there were 41 senators ready to filibuster any changes in what had been a semi-final draft of the bill. And so the choice was vote for a semi-final draft or vote for nothing at all. Because, and this is so different from every other major bill. Major legislation needs the conference committee to work out the kinks. And then, every piece of major legislation needs a technical corrections bill. And you may say, well, that just proves government is goofy. That's right. But who wants to go deal with the beta version of Quicken or the beta version of WordPerfect? The best minds in Silicon Valley have to work out the bugs, and then they put the product out there, and then they have to patch it after that. And Obamacare is more complicated than Excel. So we have been blocked in going through the regular procedure to finalize the bill. We have been blocked by passing any technical corrections to the bill. This is not the way the government's supposed to work. You're supposed to improve legislation and improve programs. We are so divided that instead of trying to work out the inevitable problems with anything this long and complicated, the whole government may shut down in an effort to try to abolish it and replace it with that system which was spiraling downward. So let's go on to the next question.
So we've actually took a few more tickets. So
John, who gets those tickets?
I'm going to put them in the front.
Good.
So these are the next numbers. If your ticket's been called, please come over here and hop in line. Numbers 549, 506, 587, 625, 623, 524, 584, 548, and 594.
My name is Carl Peterson. I'm from Northridge. I'm the father of 5. 2 of my children are
Congratulations. Go ahead.
2 of my children are autistic, and I have personal experience that the Los Angeles Central School District is ignoring Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and this guarantees every child an appropriate education. What can you do to put teeth in this law?
Well, I'm a supporter of IDEA, which I believe is the statute you're talking about. I fought in Congress because the plan was for the federal government to pay 40% of the cost. We're only paying 12% of the cost, but we imposed the full mandate on local schools. The law does have some teeth. There are lawyers who specialize in using those teeth to get children and families the services that they're entitled to. And I think the law even provides that the school district would pay for the attorney's fees if they've been unreasonable. That usually gets them, when they finally think about it, to get reasonable. So I don't know, I've worked with the disability community, the special education community. They have not asked for more teeth. Maybe you need a lawyer with a good set of interest. Thanks.
Congressman Sherman, my name is Mike House. As you know, I'm running for Congress against you. And I wanted you to reiterate what you told me outside, that you would include me in any debates. Right? Did you say that?
No, I didn't.
I think you said that to me, didn't you?
Here's been my policy for 9 elections in a row.
I have a
9
question on Syria.
elections in a row. I have looked at the requests for debates, and I've accepted at least one in every election. It is up to the debate sponsor to determine who they invite. And the one invitation that it has been my practice to honor each and every time I've run 9 times in a row is the League of Women Voters. So if the League of Women Voters organizes a debate, I will consent to it, and if they have a chair for you, you'll be there.
That's a yes, that's a yes.
That's a yes to the League of Women
But I have a
Voters.
question of Syria. I was cut off. You get one question a person.
One question, on to the next.
Not fair.
Hello, Congressman. My name is John Solke, and I'm from Sherman Oaks, California. And we're very proud to have you as our congressperson. I'm calling out, my major concern is the war against Iran. And I'm using Iran advisedly, because it's very clear that what we're doing in Syria is trying to stop the pipeline that will bring Iranian oil out to the Gulf. And that's the major reason it's part of the blockade of Iran. I think probably most of the people in the audience believe that Congress has basically drunk the Kool-Aid and is being lied into this war, just like we had the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, like we had all that perfect 15 seconds. My question is, are you going to represent the majority of the people and vote against any action in Syria and get our troops that are there out? And we have advisors on the ground now, according to the news, so we are at war. Are you going to do that in Congress?
No! Okay. First, let me deal with the premise of your question. Iran is not trying to build any pipeline through Syria, and I'll tell you why. Iran has oil located close to the Gulf, the Persian Gulf, and they'll make sure you call it the Persian Gulf and nothing else. And the cheapest way is to simply ship that oil out. And the Strait of Hormuz is something that is a vital interest for the whole world to keep open. No one has ever suggested threatening that. Now, Iran also has natural gas. They are trying to build a pipeline across Pakistan to India. We oppose that. So it's not like we're for Iranian pipelines, it's just Iran has no interest in building a pipeline through the Kurdish parts of Iraq and then into Syria. It's just not a proposal that they've made. And if you look at the economics of shipping oil, it is much cheaper for them to simply do what they're doing, which is through the Strait of Hormuz, which is also where the Saudi oil goes. As to Syria, I think we have decided that we're not taking military action against Syria. As to Iran, I think that the threat of an Iranian nuclear weapon is significant. I have been a proponent of the toughest possible sanctions since 1998. And those sanctions have led to better announced policies from the government of Iran than any policies announced any time in the last 10 years. Those policies have also led to more economic pressure on the Iranian government than any time. And that's because Obama has, over the last 2 years, actually enforced the sanctions laws. Now, he stopped us from passing one or two, but for the most part, his work with particularly European banks has had a dramatic effect on the calculus in terror. So I support the president's following the law. Those sanctions laws were ignored by his predecessor, and I think that they may very well lead to a change in the Iranian position. Let's go on to that.
Go ahead.
Mr. Congressman, where is the evidence that Assad blew up the chemical weapons, and how about the fact that Assad didn't do it and Al Qaeda did it, and we pay them? I know the real facts. You know that the Federal Reserve is a banking system created in 1913 in Jekyll Island.
I didn't catch the second part of your question.
Well, why don't we get rid of the private banking system, the Federal Reserve, that was made in 1913 in Jekyll Island?
Okay, I'll answer.
I got one more thing to say. Business?
Thank you.
Okay, because you're the youngest questioner I've ever had, I'll answer both of your questions. First, the Federal Reserve plays an important role. You're right that banks, rather than the public, get to determine who sits on the boards of some of their regional banks. And I have supported making the Federal Reserve entirely governmental and not partially private. We should be able to elect a president knowing and holding him responsible or her responsible for whoever gets appointed to every one of the governorships in the Federal Reserve, not just the National Board, not just the Monetary Policy Committee, but the local Federal Reserve Board governors as well. Now, as to the chemical weapons, I do not think we've paid anybody in Syria to explode a chemical weapon. I have seen the intelligence on the August 21 event, and I believe that there is substantial proof that it was conducted by Assad. That being the case, you're able to ask a question just as good as anybody else in this room. Thank you very much, and after Michael runs against me, you'll be ready. Go ahead.
And I win.
Yeah, you can run against Michael.
My name is Manny Nedwick. I live in Kennewick Park. And I have a question regarding, again, it's related to Obamacare, but I have two daughters who are going to school, in college, and getting a full-time job anywhere is just about impossible. Nobody wants to hire people and give them full-time work. And in cases where they have got a job where they could have been eligible for full-time work, they've been laid off before the thing came up. It's, it may be personal things, but I know all sorts of people where they can't get full-time work. I even have a brother-in-law who works for Ralph's, for Bonds, and it's very hard for him to get full-time work. And as you probably know, the grocers union is worthless nowadays, but they want to be able to stop people from being able to having to pay for insurance. Can you please address that?
Okay. First, as to Vaughn's, that's UCFW. They've been required to provide health coverage under their union contract for decades. So Obamacare does not force Vaughn's to do anything more than they've had to do for decades. As to the many, many people who cannot get full-time work, in every recession, between 5 and 10, sometimes even more than 10% of the workforce is made up of people who aren't counted as unemployed because they are employed, but they have part-time work and they want full-time work. That was true 3 years ago, it was true in the recession before that, and it was true in the recession before that. So the fact that we don't have enough jobs, we don't have enough good jobs, we don't have enough full-time jobs is not something I blame on Obamacare. Go on.
Hi, my name is Rosie Press. I was an Air Force fighter pilot's wife for 21 years. I was a hostage in Iran in 1978. I'm an American war hero. I'm the one that got the evacuation started and 40,000 Americans got out. And last month I told you all to speak up because this country is in a war and now we're going into World War III. And my question is, on today, we have our National Security Advisor a year ago, who is now our National Security Advisor, Susan Rice, said that Benghazi was due to a video. This country has all these scandals, the IRS, the NSA, there's no jobs, the economy is falling apart. The President in July just signed an executive order to take away all our privacy and security and privileges, whatever he wants to do. And why I'm asking that this is like Hitler-esque, but this is more Russian, and I don't want to live in Russian. Why isn't Congress, the Democrats and the Republicans, standing up for the greatest country in the world and just letting Obama, the worst president we've ever had, do whatever he wants?
This is why the World Wrestling Federation thinks I'm cutting into the roads. Let's go on to the next question.
You can't answer any of those, huh? Laugh at it, political.
I'll move on to the next question.
Hi. I want to say I'm Sharon Forward from Chatsworth. I really appreciate everything you do for us. I think you're a fabulous congressman. You have the guts to vote against TARP. I'm incredibly proud of you. I saw you when you were speaking in front of Congress, and I thought, whoa, that's my man. So you deserve some kudos there. I want to ask you very briefly about reinstating Glass-Steagall. I would like to know how you feel about that. And I also would like to ask you a little bit about the Trans-Pacific Partnership and how you're thinking along those lines as well. Just remember, I'm your friend.
I understand. Let me answer that. I'll answer in reverse order. Trans-Pacific Partnership hasn't been written, so I haven't come out against the text they haven't written. But I've been opposed to every similar trade deal. I see it as a backdoor free trade agreement with China because of what I saw in the Korea Free Trade Agreement, which is rules of origin, where something can be 65% made in China, 35% made in South Korea, and then sent to us with no tariffs. I have objected to all these trade agreements from NAFTA on forward. They undermine American sovereignty, and they lead to higher unemployment in the United States because they increase the trade deficit. As to Glass-Steagall, there are two approaches. And one approach gets a lot more attention because it's got a great name called Glass-Steagall. The Glass-Steagall statute was passed in the early 30s. By the 1990s, lawyers had found so many roads through it that I think it was Citibank was able to buy travelers insurance, which was the exact thing that Glass-Steagall was designed to prevent, the mixing of commercial banking with insurance with investment banking. So there are those who can piggyback on the great brand name of Glass-Steagall because it was there for decades and everybody's heard of Glass-Steagall and say, let's just re-adopt the statutory language that the lawyers had turned into Swiss cheese when we got rid of it. There are two approaches to banks being too large. One is consistent with my own ethnic heritage. My people don't mix meat and milk. And there are those who say the key is you can't mix insurance with depository institutions. But my credit union will sell me auto insurance, and I don't think that's a threat to the national economy. The other approach, and one that's more consistent with losing weight, is don't look at whether you have both meat and milk on the plate, unless your religion requires it, but look instead as to how much calories you have on the plate. That's why I prefer the Sanders-Sherman bill, not just because it has a good second name, but because it's aimed at the size of the plate rather than, oh my God, you have one drop of milk next to one small piece of meat. My credit union is not going to be a threat to the national economy. Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, were all conforming to Glass-Steagall. They didn't mix things. They were just too big. And today, except for some technically Goldman Sachs is a commercial bank because they bought a little tiny commercial bank for certain advantages. But for the most part, they could lose their commercial bank tomorrow. And you know what? They'd still have too many calories on the plate. That's why Sanders-Sherman says, if you're too big to fail, you're too big to exist. It's a matter of how large the financial institution is. And if you are a $200 billion institution that's going to say you conform to Glass-Steagall because you're just an investment bank, you're $200 billion, that's too large a percentage of our economy. Do what, the smart guys on Wall Street should at least be able to do what a protozoa can do. What does a protozoa do when it gets too big? It divides into two healthy protozoa. If a protozoa can do it, Goldman Sachs can do it too. Thank you.
So a friend in the Spirit t-shirt has picked a few more tickets. 547, 519, 615, 518, and 526.
Hi, Congressman Sherman. I'm Anita Lee, and I'm a Results volunteer and also one of your constituents. Results is an organization that is working to eradicate poverty globally and domestically, and I want to thank you for your votes and standing for the people that have no voice. We all live in the suburbs, and there are a lot of people that need these benefits that are in our community that have been hit during this recession. The economy is recovering, but I think it's only recovering for a small few. This week, Congress is going to vote to cut $40 billion off of SNAP, which will throw 6 to 8 million Americans off of this food assistance. And a lot of people, and we had a discussion, you and I appreciate your accessibility very much, but we talked about how I was growing up in the 60s, there was a national effort that really kind of shined a light, and it asked us all to be mindful and better Americans and show kindness to our fellow people rather than telling them to pull themselves up by the bootstraps that don't exist any longer. My time is up, but what I want you to do is, could you just address a little bit what we're facing this week if Congress does cut $40 billion from SNAP? Thank you so much.
There has been a continuing effort to slash the food stamp program. I've opposed it. I'm not going to, I do not know how the legislation will proceed. I'm not going to promise you that I won't vote for anything that's the slightest possible cut because they got a lot of votes. They have a lot of votes on the floor. And I may have to vote for some sort of compromise. But what they're talking about now is just outrageous. I'll do everything I can to maintain SNAP as we know it today. As to your earlier comment, yes, over the last decade plus, all of the increase in our income and GDP has gone to the top 1%, virtually all of it. This used to be a middle-class country. I blame a lot on the trade deals as to why we've seen a hollowing out of our economy and a situation in which it's so hard to find middle-class jobs. But I think as more and more people focus on this, they're going to agree to a massive change in our trade policy, and perhaps some change in our tax policy as well. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Elise Wakerman. I'm from Sherman Oaks, and just as a general observation, it sometimes seems that the Republican Party reminds me of my daughter when she was 12. If I said good morning, she said, "What do you mean? What's good about it?" So I wish that the Democrats that we have elected to the Congress and the Senate presented at least 2/3 of a united front behind our president, as the Republicans do against him. So that is just a general observation. As far as Syria goes, from what I understand from your remarks, Congressman Sherman, you applaud the current deal that the UN and Russia and Kerry, one of the most anti-war people ever to serve in the government, is trying to work out. So you applaud that?
I applaud it, but I remain skeptical, and we're going to watch carefully. Go ahead.
Okay. You agree that the atrocity on August 21st was an atrocity, and it was caused by Assad. And yet you say that you won't authorize any kind of military force. How do you square that? Thank you.
I do not believe that we should send ground forces to everywhere in the world where there are atrocities. That being said, what we've seen in Syria is one step worse. And that is and one major step worse, we see the use of chemical weapons. I think that the best plan that's been put forward to deal with the chemical weapons issue is the Russian proposal. I will remain skeptical and observant, but I have, been convinced that the deal is in Russia's interest as well as America's interest, which is why I'm somewhat confident that Russia is serious. Keep in mind, even if we were able to get all the chemical weapons out of Syria, there are going to be atrocities in Syria by both sides. And the question is, would I support boots on the ground to deal with the conventional weapons that are being used by both sides, but especially Assad to slaughter civilians? The answer is no, I would not support boots on the ground to do that. Would I support arming some of the opposition? I'd have to look very carefully at the opposition. That process is getting more difficult as the al-Nusra elements take on a stronger role within the opposition. So, and keep in mind there are atrocities taking place in Eastern Congo, in so many other places as well that just don't get the publicity. Next, another one. My God, it's a reunion. For those of you who don't know, Mark Reed was Mark Reed was also one of my opponents in the last election, and the election before that.
Yeah, so my name is Mark Reed. I've run against Brad Sherman twice, so I've done a lot of research on his history and his voting record, and I'm going to correct a couple of things right before I get to the question, and that is, he voted no for TARP in 2008, November. When it came back from the Senate and Senate amendments in November of 2009, he voted yes. So he voted yes for the bailouts. Also,
Mark, you got that one wrong.
Excuse me, I've got the mic at the moment. In July of 2010, he stated, and I have it on record, he stated that he did not read Obamacare and that he would vote for any bill that was put onto the floor. And now they've gone ahead and exempted themselves from Obamacare because it's such a beautiful bill. Now my question to you, Mr. Sherman, is will you address the allegations during this IRS scandals that your office in 2010 threatened the 501c3 status of an organization here in the San Fernando Valley, and your office dropped the ball on several complaints to your office about 501c4s that were being targeted by the IRS and held back?
Good question. That's a lot of questions. Let's go through the record. I voted against TARP twice in 2008. I led, according to the Washington Post, the opposition both times. The rest of that question is probably just as factual. As to members of Congress being exempted from Obamacare, we are the only ones who where they violated that rule. They said with Obamacare, if you like what you've got, you keep it. We're the only ones that are losing the coverage we have now. We are going to be in the exchange, and the OMB has decided that the federal government will be paying some, but not as much as they used to. So the only folks where you could say where the proponents of Obamacare say, yeah, that group's getting worse coverage is members of Congress and my fine staff. That being said, I'm still going to have a better deal than the folks that give me a burger at McDonald's, who aren't going to get anything at all from their employer. My employer is going to be doing something just less than what they did for me this year, and less than what they do for the clerk at the Social Security office up the street. As to IRS, I have no idea what Mark's talking about, but I'm sure he'll send out some brochures explaining it. And I answered at least 2 of his questions, which is double what he's entitled to. Go on.
Hello, my name is Tracy Johnson, and I'm a voter from the city of Rosita. And I have a statement question here prepared, but I'd like to start off by saying, as I'm not a fan of Obama, I appreciate the fact that he brought Syria thing to Congress, as it should be according to the Constitution. Unfortunately, I think that puts you in a position where you had to show your cards. Congressman, despite the overwhelming majority of Americans being opposed to it, you have said plainly enough that you support U.S. involvement in the Syrian conflict. I would like to know, how do you determine your decisions? Is it based on the majority of your constituents' wishes, democracy, or do you just presume to know what is best for us and decide on your own? If your decisions are based on democracy, please explain to me and to us how you determine what the majority of the people you represent want. Is it phone calls, emails? Do you take a poll? Do we ask the people in this room here how many support military involvement in Syria? I would like to know how to best help you understand the wishes of the people. Should I collect signatures? If you cannot answer this question to our satisfaction, I predict, sir, that your stance on the issue being in complete disregard of the wishes of the people who hired you will cost you your job.
Okay. I don't take a poll before I cast a vote. If I took a scientific poll, they would have to more than quintuple my office budget. And if I took a poll in my town halls, I would think I represented a district that hated Obama since 2007. When in fact, Obama carried the district 2-1 both times. So, as to Syria, I did make a comment that it was America's red line, not Obama's red line. I think the Hill newspaper was listening at the time, since it was a committee hearing, and then tapped me as being therefore in favor of military action. The fact is, I have announced I would vote against the first resolution, against the second resolution, and would evaluate future resolutions, not only for the text of the resolution, but the foreign policy context. So, when unpaid interns are listening to committee hearings and then trying to decide how you're going to vote on something that hasn't been written, sometimes they put you in a category that's inappropriate. But I will say this: I don't take a poll before I vote. There are times where I've cast votes where I really do think that it will impair my next re-election campaign. And keep in mind, I'm going to the classified briefings for a reason. And that is I'm getting a bit more information than others. So I have to defend what I do. My votes are very much an open book. And some of them are consistent with getting reelected, and some of them are consistent with returning to legal practice.
So it's 4:50 now. We have 2 more questions, that's it.
2 more?
Okay. Mine's easier. I'm Alice McCain. I live in Woodland Hills. I am a realtor. And although prices of homes are going up, which is helping many people, there are still many short pay sellers out there. And the mortgage debt relief ends as of December 31st. What are our chances of getting that mortgage relief for short pay sellers extended?
I am certainly a supporter of dealing with the situation of when somebody has to give up their home and get nothing in the escrow, in effect giving the whole purchase price to the bank, that isn't a reason to tax them if it occurs in the middle of this recession. I wish I could tell you that, and I think a majority of my colleagues, if they just focused on that one issue, would agree with us. I'm not sure that Congress is capable of passing common sense tax legislation. We are tied up in knots. We are focused now on whether to pay the bills where we already bought the stuff. I mean, this is like you go to a restaurant with your spouse and your discussion about fiscal responsibility is whether to pay the restaurant bill or whether to just try to sneak out the back door, which ultimately will have a worse effect on your credit. I mean, I wish I could say I'm part of the United States Congress, the greatest deliberative body on the face of the planet, able to make easy decisions quickly and difficult decisions with brilliance and acumen, but then you'd know I wasn't talking about the United States Congress. So I'm with you, and I'll try. As for the importance of home prices, I do want to point out how important that is for the overall economy, because I talk to people who say, hey, I don't own a home. Why do I care about any of that? And the rest of the waitress at Corky's pointed that out to me. I said, look, if people here, not the person selling a home, not the person buying a home, most people this year, they're not buying a home, they're not selling a home. But if you hear that the home down the street had to cut its price another $20,000 and there's still no buyers, you're not going out to any restaurant that doesn't have golden arches in front of it. And so if we're going to have people in the stores, if we're going to have people in the restaurants, if we're going to try to spin upward rather than downward with our local and national economy, we need to have homeowners believe that home prices aren't in free fall. And the National Association of Realtors has done a great job in pushing forward legislation and Fed policies that are getting us out of that downward spiral. So thank you for that.
Last question.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Kristen.
Last question.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Kristen Bailey, and I'm from Tarzana. Thank you for.
I think you're our first Tarzana.
Oh, yeah, awesome. Thank you for having me here. I want to let you know I'm opposed to going to war in Syria. I don't think we should provide the boots there, and we don't have the resources considering our economy. I am one that is also unemployed despite having an MBA. I remain unemployed, desperately looking for a job, so I can relate to a lot of you out there. Secondarily, my question really is about government accountability. Obama ran on a platform to provide transparency in government, yet he's not done this. Benghazi, we still don't have anyone that's accountable for 4 Americans dead. Secondarily, the IRS scandal, we have no one that's been held accountable for them declining applications for those that oppose their views, subjectively applying the tax code regulations. Thank you.
Thank you. And there is a tendency when government agencies make a mistake for no individual's career to suffer or be terminated. The IRS is clearly a case where a mistake was made. As to Benghazi, there were 2 mistakes, the big one and the small one. The big one was, unfortunately, we lost 4 people because we tried to operate a consulate on the anniversary of 9/11 in a very lawless city. There are a lot of people who made that decision. The person most qualified to make that decision was the ambassador. And no one can say that he didn't show great heroism in the decision he made. He said, I know it's dangerous. I know that Eastern Libya is far more dangerous than Western Libya. We've got business to do there. There is some risk that I won't come back. And it's easy for us to second guess him now and say, well, didn't you realize there was a 90% chance or 100% chance that armed elements would storm in? No, he didn't realize it was that big a chance. No, and he was our best expert. And today, there are ambassadors making decisions to risk their lives and those of their staffs. There are U.S. ambassadors with an American flag on their car driving through the streets of Islamabad, driving through the streets of Cairo, going to meetings because you can't be an effective ambassador just sitting in an armed compound in the safest part of the capital city. And so he risked his life, and he made a decision, and he was the most qualified person to make the decision. He made a courageous decision, and by God, he did pay a price. The second issue is, why hadn't it gotten up to Susan Rice what the attack was motivated by? And that was certainly something that she has paid the price for. She'd be Secretary of State today if it wasn't for that. And Senator Kerry would be in the Senate, and we'd be in a difficult circumstance. So she made a mistake in how she characterized it. Then the argument is, well, was this mistake somehow part of a brilliant plan to put a shine on the Obama foreign policy? And I think not, because there are two ways.
Where was their support?
Hold on. There are two ways to view what happened in Benghazi. One is that the people of Benghazi, as a whole, hate us so much, after we liberated them from Gaddafi, still hate us so much, that they rose up, not just to say they didn't like a video, but to kill our ambassador, who was one of the most loved Americans in Libya. If that was true, and it turned out not to be, although that's what the picture Susan Rice painted, that shows that our foreign policy in Libya was not all that good at winning hearts and minds. To me, that's a scarier foreign policy, a less successful foreign policy than what actually happened, which was there were dozens of armed militia, Al-Qaeda influenced, Al-Qaeda affiliated, use your term, who plotted to kill Americans and went out and did it. Now, to me, that second picture is more consistent with the image I had of Libya to begin with. It's a dangerous country with a variety of elements. Hundreds and hundreds of people from Eastern Libya went all the way to Iraq just to shoot us. They went back, and some of them were engaged in destroying Gaddafi. And so the reality is a foreign policy that led us to a situation where there are dozens of organized evil men in Eastern Libya, which to me is less of a black eye to our foreign policy than the image Susan Rice was painting, which was that there are hundreds of thousands of Benghazi residents ready with no advance notice, no planning, without weapons, to go risk their lives in order to kill us. So the image that Susan Rice was painting was not that one of an effective foreign policy, but of a total failure of public diplomacy. In any case, the picture she painted was false. She's got the second best job in American foreign policy, still the best job. And so she has also paid a price. Now you can say that there are others involved in the decision of what Susan Rice said that have not paid a price, but if you had to pick one person who's responsible for what Susan Rice said on TV, Most people, and this might not be fair, but most people would just say, well, Susan Rice was the most responsible. And if you had to say, pick one person who was best equipped to make the decision as to whether our ambassador should be in Benghazi, it was our ambassador, and he made a decision that showed that he was a patriot, showed that he was willing to take a risk, showed that that risk was very hard to evaluate, and he paid for his heroism with his life. That being said, I think we're 12 minutes over. I want to thank everybody for coming. I hope to have our next town hall in November. If you have your, if you fill out a yellow card, I'll guarantee to send you a couple emails about the next town hall. Thank you very much.
Thank you for first.
Yeah, no problem.